And so we have a bloodline, a blood descent. And with the thought of a marriage between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, the Grail is now the womb of the Magdalene. She bears the blood of Jesus and creates the bloodline of their descent. And so the secret messages that the priest apparently had found began to make sense in a different context. This treasure belongs to Dagobert II, king, and to Zion, and he is their dead. Are we talking about a blood descent? Dagobert II, the last effective king of the Merovingian dynasty of France, and were they the blood descendants of Jesus?
In 1982, that suggestion caused an outcry.
And we come to 2002, 20 years later, when a thriller is written called The Da Vinci Code, which picks up the hypothesis from our book and turns it into a thriller.
Wolfram actually coined a word for his Grail Knights. They were Templison, or Templison is the correct one, Templison, the Iron Men of the Temple. He also described the Grail King whom they served as one who rules over an invisible or spiritual kingdom and Lord of invisible brotherhood. Now, some would argue that the Templar Brotherhood and the Guardians of the Grail were actually one brotherhood, not necessarily protecting a chalice or some other magical object. They could have been guarding something intangible, some secret, some treasure, or some special knowledge as a source of power from which derived their moral strength and which made them super knights at that time, capable of transcending national and human boundaries.
So the knighthood of the Grail began by this proof of courage, proof of integrity. This type of thing and this realization of what should be then helps the individual to gain this equilibrium, and he becomes a knight errant. He becomes one dedicated to the service of the system, the Grail system, the Garter system, the orders of the Quest, the orders of the Bath, and all the great orders of chivalry. The search for the Golden Fleece, which is the great order of chivalry in Europe, on the continent, is again the same thing. The Golden Fleece is the ray of light flowing from the Lamb of God. So all these things tie in, and little by little we begin to reverse the sources of our inspiration and influence.
That the same ideal of union of knighthood and sanctity was found in the Templar Order and the Grail Guardians, and so on. It is even possible to envisage that the Templar Order, among others like the Teutonic Knights and the Hospitallers, was the manifest model upon whom the ideal conception of the Grail Guardian was built up by the Grail storytellers. Now, this becomes especially significant if we place the Templars within the spiritual lineage of the secret initiatory tradition of the mystery schools. And ladies and gentlemen, that's exactly where you had better place them. The Templars held their meetings in private. They initiated their recruits within their chapels in secrecy and defied external attempts by courts of the time and by posterity to discover the secrets in their worship. Historical links can be traced between the Rosicrucian order, AMORC, and Rosicrucian activity in the late Middle Ages. That is, in the time of the Crusades, Templars, alchemists, Cathars, Provençal Kabbalists, and Grail literature. The area of the most intense activity for all these groups was the south of France, although the movements were widespread throughout Europe. It is reasonable to assume that some Templars were Rosicrucians and vice versa. And the same could be said of Templars and Cathars and Rosicrucians. That some Templars fought in the Albigensian Crusade against Cathars does not negate the cross links between the movements. These Templars felt their first loyalty was to papal authority, from whom they received their authority to function. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is one of the myths of the Templar order.
The priest Béranger Saunière led Lincoln Baginton Lee to an extended study of European history. This fresh approach unearthed new discoveries and unexpected connections. Chief amongst these was the suggestion that the Priory of Zion may have been responsible for the creation of that enigmatic order of warrior monks, the Knights Templar. And with any investigation of the Knights Templar, it's hard to avoid dealing with the popular notion of their association with the myth of the Holy Grail.
And in the early Grail stories, the Templars were referred to as the guardians of the Grail and the Grail family. It was the protection of a family which led to the idea of a bloodline, which gave us the dramatic hypothesis of a blood descent from Jesus, and that Jesus, unlike the image we get from him in the Gospels, was in fact married, and that he was married to Mary Magdalene, and she was the Grail.
So gradually the Church of the Holy Grail concept is the person gradually becoming part of an assemblage of the enlightened. This assemblage of the enlightened we find in the mythology of Egypt and of Greece and of most ancient peoples. Like the mysterious mountain in the tablet of Cebes, the person rises finally to a mysterious and wonderful castle on the top of the mountain. This is the castle of the inner life, the consciousness. This is the castle that is referred to in alchemy as the shut palace of the king. It is the divine acacia, the place of wisdom, love, and veneration.
So who were the Grail guardians? The question is sometimes asked, is the existence of Grail guardians mythical, or are they historical figures? This leads to the same debate on the nature of the Grail. Is it an object or symbol? There have been attempts to establish a lineage over the centuries, a succession of Grail keepers, an actual rather than a legendary family, a physical bloodline that matched the spiritual one. And for those of you who would like to pursue that, I suggest you read Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Lee, Baigent, and Lincoln.
So the Church of the Holy Grail is the invisible sanctuary of truth, the real heart of God. And the real heart of God is the eternal love of deity, disseminated through all the worlds and all the spheres of existence. And this love has its particular and proper abode in the heart of each of us. It is this love in the heart which is the Redeemer. And in this case, the blood of God in our own hearts is really blood flowing in a grail or cup. The heart itself is the vessel in which the living blood of God is forever disseminated throughout the world.
A path is traced from the time of the Crusades through the Merovingian dynasty to Mary Magdalene and to Jesus. An apparent reference in Wolfram's work to an actual Merovingian ruler of a principality in the south of France is referenced for supporting evidence. With Wolfram's reputation as cryptic writer, the opinion is expressed, and I quote, The more one studies him, the more likely it seems that he is referring to an actual group of people, not a mythic or fictionalized family, end quote. By Jant, page 317. The evidence is a bit tenuous, and the conclusions either tend to raise a few eyebrows or thrill others with the connections explored. Corroboration by other research is wanting, meaning non-existent, but we must keep an open mind about this as we take up another line of thought on the identity of the Grail guardians. In this case, the lineage is not genetic or fictional, but mystical. And that's, ladies and gentlemen, where I tell you the path lies.
And as we gather a little bit here in Christmas time, it might be valuable to realize some of these points, that we are living in a world of divine potential. There is nothing that is necessary to us that is not available. But we cannot come to the greater while we cling desperately to the lesser. We cannot be gods and mortals at the same time. Actually, we never were mortals in the truest sense of the word. We have always been gods in disguise. At the moment, we are gods in distress. Difficulties and problems are gathering around us. But behind, within, and about all of these is this immense sanctuary of life. Universes going on, cosmic systems going on, galaxies going on, and all that exists, the living church of the Grail, the one tremendous structure of universal integrities. You can't join it in the ordinary sense of paying dues. It's not interested in dues, but it does have something about it. It wants nothing, needs nothing, and can use nothing but the best of each of us. And with the proper enlightenment, each one will become worthy of knighthood in this story of human progress.
Through all the myriad lines of investigation in this story, the priest's treasure, the Knights Templar, the Cathars, the Merovingian kings, the Priory of Zion, the Holy Bloodline, one thing is certain, demonstrable, and provable. It is that Rennes-le-Château is part of an extraordinary, invisible phenomenon. The real treasure in this story is neither gold, nor silver and diamonds, nor even the Holy Grail. At its simplest, it is a 5-pointed star. A pentacle. And at one point, Rennes-le-Château.